So delighted to have Jordan Peterson back on the show. I had him on originally when he had about 600 views on YouTube. Our mutual friend, the thriller writer Greg Hurwitz, told me about him, and I watched him, and I thought, oh boy, this guy has really got something. He has since become the man the New York Times calls the most influential public intellectual in the Western world. Right now, he is a Canadian clinical psychologist, a cultural critic, professor of psychology at the University of Toronto, and of course, the author of 12 Rules for Life, an Antidote for Chaos, and a new book, Beyond Order, 12 More Rules for Life. Jordan, welcome back.
Thanks, Andrew. It's really good to see you.
So
I think I had more than 600 subscribers, but maybe not many more.
The first time I looked at you, the first time Greg told me about you, I looked at you and it was really, the clicker was just starting. And had I had hair, it would have stood on end. But I was really taken with what you were saying, and you were making a courageous stance. And it was great. It was great. You know, one of the things that has become a genuine mystery to me, you wrote this book, 12 Rules for Life, and obviously it's a deeply philosophical book, but at its core are rules for life like make your bed, stand up straight. And you have become one of the most hated men in America for telling people that. My sister, Caitlin, she's really my sister-in-law, but at this point she's graduated to my sister. Caitlin Flanagan wrote this about you. She said, there are many legitimate reasons to disagree with him on a number of subjects, and many people of goodwill do, but there's no coherent reason for the left's obliterating and irrational hatred of Jordan Peterson. What accounts for it? And being my sister Katie, she then answers her own question. She says, it is because the left, while it currently seems ascendant in our houses of culture and art, has in fact entered its decadent late phase and it is deeply vulnerable. Is that why, do you agree with that? Is that why people hate you?
Fortunately, most people don't hate me. And that is, I really mean that fortunately, because I don't know how it would be possible to live really as someone who was, reviled. When I'm in public, people are very kind to me always, or virtually without exception. I think I've had 2 negative encounters with people publicly, which was plenty, but it's out of thousands and thousands. And why I raise the ire of a certain proportion of people, well, some of that's political confusion, I suppose, and some of it's something deeper. I mean, Nellie Bowles in the New York Times called me sort of ironically defender of the patriarchy, and that's actually true. And I think that's why, at the core of it, I think that's why I attract the negative attention I do when I attract it. Because, and I've thought about too, well, why me specifically? And God only knows the reason for that. I mean, but I have some provisional reasons. And one of them is that I'm an admirer of Enlightenment values and scientific thinking, but I also have deep regard and respect for religious thinking simultaneously. And I think that makes me somewhat unique because I speak for both sides of the patriarchy, let's say, the spiritual and even traditional side, as well as the scientific side. And I mean, I understand that there's tensions in holding those views simultaneously, but there's tension in life. And we're never in a position where we can solve all the mysteries that are presented to us. I see that the scientific endeavor, the technological endeavor has dramatically improved people's lives on a material basis. And I see that the religious and traditional side provides us with meaning and structure. And we can't throw those things away lightly. We don't want to throw away progress, and we don't want to throw away our higher purpose, or we'll just search for it elsewhere. And I think those are at least part of the reason why, people like to not be very happy with me.
They're always saying
it's odd, though.
It really is odd. I mean, they're always accusing you that you're talking to angry young men. Is that true? And
it's angry young white men, because everything has to be about race.
Absolutely,
in our post-race society. Yeah, well, and every time I've been attacked, I've thought about it. Let's say to begin with, but then I'm also willing to give the devil his due. It's and that one of the things I've come to realize about the latter accusation, which is is true within a limited scope. Some of the people that listen to me are angry, some of them are young, some of them are white, and some of them are men, and there's overlap between all four of those groups. An intersectional overlap, you might say. But even if I was only talking to those people, it's like, is that such a problem? It's not like I'm trying to marshal them into some sort of marauding horde. I'm suggesting that, that they have some intrinsic dignity and some worth, and that if they attended to their own affairs diligently and with a certain amount of truth, that's their best hope. Not that that'll work, because nothing is as certain, that's for sure, but we don't have a better alternative than that. And I'm quite tired of the global assault on, human values. It's not just Western values. I've been thinking about that too. That's a very parochial view. There's something remarkable about the central tendency of Western culture. But what that remarkable thing is the central tendency of humanity. And I stand beside that, let's say, and try, I suppose, to whatever degree I can, to embody and support and transmit it, which is what a university professor is supposed to do. And so, and I've been trying to puzzle through why it is that those ideas are under such assault. It's very difficult to understand. This emphasis on systemic racism, for example, I've been trying to take that apart. It's a very interesting phrase. It's a very cunning and manipulative phrase, because the racism part of it leaps out at you and yells and stuns you into kind of an ethical silence. And then the systemic is just sort of whispered in there. And systemic is a very serious accusation. It's not the statement that some of our systems, our social institutions, sometimes tilt in a prejudicial direction in a manner that's harmful to everyone, especially those who are suffering from the prejudice. It's the claim that the central tendency is racist. And to me, that's not only wrong, it's the antithesis of the truth. And then I have to puzzle out, well, why is this claim being made when the central tendency is what enlightens and frees all of us, unless we're doomed, unless we're unfathomably corrupt with no hope of redemption, bar the revolution and its hypothetical utopia. And you have to be a complete bloody fool to believe that that's even hypothetically possible.
One of my favorite pieces of advice in the new book, Beyond Order, 12 More Rules for Life, is abandon ideology. And just to read a very brief section of it, it says, have some humility, clean up your bedroom, take care of your family, follow your conscience, straighten up your life. And when you can do all that, find a bigger problem and try to solve that if you dare. And when I read that, Bill Gates came to mind, a guy trying to change the world who can't keep his marriage together. But is ideology an escape from personal failure? Is that what we're dealing with? Or is something bigger going on? Because the Western world certainly seems to be in the grips of ideology beyond all reason.
There's as is always the case, there's probably a multitude of reasons. I mean, we all want to explain as much of the world as we can because we want to be able to predict the world and to control it to some degree. And so if we're offered up an explanatory theory that conveniently explains virtually everything, and we don't have to test it rigorously in all of its applications, we can just assume that it's correct without rigorously testing it. Well, there's a certain comfort in that. Then there's the attraction of being able to band together with like-minded others, and that's not all reprehensible. Then there's the social critique element of it, and God knows that there are problems with our systems and our culture, and so it's reasonable to want to be on the side that's improving them. But mostly I see it as a substitute for genuine religious endeavor. I've thought for a long time, I wrote about this extensively in my first book, Maps of Meaning, that ideology is a parasite on religion, essentially. Cognitively speaking, is that we need a domain that addresses the most fundamental issues in life. This is regardless of your belief in God in some sense. It's a separate issue. Psychologically speaking, there's a unifying tendency in our ethical striving that promotes a kind of monotheistic thinking. And that needs to be parsed out into genuine religious endeavor. And if it isn't, then it contaminates other domains of endeavor. They become inevitably They expand to take that place. And I think this is a truth, a psychological truth, that the new atheists, for example, have failed entirely to recognize or grapple with. It's like, well, what if we are religious by nature? And I mean, what does that imply metaphysically? That's a very, very deep question and a separate question. But if we are religious by nature, and I do believe the evidence supports that view, then what happens if that instinct isn't being fulfilled? And the answer for me is that, well, it just finds its satisfaction in secondary sources. So instead of worshiping Christ, let's say, and we could imagine Christ momentarily as our imaginative representation of the ideal human being, which and his figure is at least that, even technically speaking. We admire Che Guevara or some subsidiary substitute who has some of the attributes of the mythological hero, of the central mythological hero, but is lacking many of them. And we mistake the political for the religious. And then the totalizing tendency there is, well, we know what that is. It's unbelievably dangerous because now you're an agent of God. You know, and I think when you're an agent of God in the true sense, what a horrible thing to contemplate, let's say, is that, well, that's when you're concerned more with your own sins, your own shortcomings, your own transgressions, and your inability to speak the truth. You know, that's the proper way to focus.
This is, I think, a subject of fascination to everybody who listens to you, and certainly to me. Whenever I've talked to you, I can't help but ask you if you believe in God. And I've always felt that I was being kind of cruel, like a guy shooting at somebody's feet, you know, to make them dance around. But even as you were talking just now, I was thinking, you know, I know you're a Jungian, and I'm not as big a fan of Jung as you are. And I've always thought that Jung didn't actually understand what faith was when he talked about the fact that we don't know whether God is just our experience of the totality of things. I think people of faith know they don't know. That's why it's called faith and not knowledge. Have you changed? I mean, recently I've watched interviews with you where you seem like you've gotten a more personal, you're having a more personal interaction with this idea. Is that fair?
Well, when I did a biblical lecture series on Genesis, which has proved to be quite popular, I suppose, if that's the right word for it. And I discovered while doing that the word Israel meant those who struggle with God. Right. Well, that's fair enough. And so then I'm a member of the camp of Israel. and is that faith? Well, I don't know. I mean, I've been accused of, you know, wiggling out of this answer continually. And I mean, I have to take refuge in some sense in my own ignorance. I'm striving towards what I perceive as the ideal. I attempt to be truthful in my speech and in my approach to life, and to embody the classic virtues to the degree that I'm capable. And I believe that is faith, because that's what you stake your life on. Faith is what you stake your life on. It isn't your agreement with a set of propositions. I believe that to be an improper interpretation of the word faith, because faith is expressed in action. You have to make assumptions to proceed in life. Well, you do that in a marriage. Your marriage is held together by faith. Well, what does that mean? Does it mean you believe your wife exists? No, that isn't what it means. It means that you've decided that you're going to bet your life on your marriage. And have I bet my life on God? Well, yes. Does that mean that I know that God exists? Well, how would I know? I can't know, and neither can anyone else. That's the thing. You can't know. And I also do understand that there are experiences that transcend the normative human there are experiences that transcend our normal realm, obviously, that they can be induced chemically, for example. There's a domain of spiritual experience. But I can't say that I understand what that means. I can just stand outside it in some sense and say, well, I do believe, for example, that what's central to Christianity, at least in part, is a centuries-long discussion about the nature of what's ideal. That seems to me to be perfectly obvious, and that a society has to do that because we want our young people, and our old people for that matter, to embody the ideal. I don't know what that ideal means metaphysically, right, in relationship to reality, because I don't understand, for example, the relationship between the objective and the subjective at all. And I don't understand consciousness at all. And I don't know what its metaphysical role in being is. I mean, from the objective perspective, it's nothing. But there isn't an objective perspective on consciousness, really. Right? It doesn't fit in there. It's the antithesis of the objective. But there it is. So I struggle along, and I share that with the people that are reading me and listening to me. And I think that's better. It works better that way as well.
Well, I can certainly see that last point that you made, but I still think there's something missing from that explanation. It's absolutely certain that everything we experience is a human experience. Everything takes place in our consciousness. But when I sit on this chair, I'm essentially believing in my own sanity. I mean, when I have the experience of a moral universe, which I think you have to agree can't exist without a moral ideal, when you have the experience of a moral universe, and when reason has taken you to the point where you can see that ideal is something that you should follow, isn't it just believing in your own sanity to say, yes, God is there. That's what I believe in. I believe I don't believe my wife is there. I know my wife is there. I believe in my own sanity. I understand what you're saying, that sharing your struggle is helpful and useful. But at some point, don't you have to grasp that your perceptions are actually real if you were sane?
That's a good question, Andrew. I don't know the answer to that, to grant under the conditions under which my perceptions are real. I mean, are dreams real?
No.
but they are my perceptions.
But they're really dreams.
They are real in that they're dreams, and they are representations of reality.
But if you dream that it rains, or if somebody chemically induces in you this experience that it rains, the crops still die because the rain hasn't fallen on the crops. If you see rain and the crops grow, then rain has fallen, right? There is a difference between our perceptions and our perceptions that are real. That's the difference between being
but that's exactly the issue. Is you said that you stake your sanity to some degree on your belief that your perceptions are real, but you don't, because some of your perceptions fall into the realm of the subjective and some of them fall into the realm of the objective. And there aren't any of us wise enough to bridge the gap between those two realities. And I guess this is part of the reason that you also have a problem with Jung. I mean, I would say Jung certainly acted as if God existed. And when he was pressed, he said, I don't believe I know. It isn't obvious what he meant by that. But when he was pushed as a scientist or a scientifically minded thinker, he said, well, I can't be sure that our perception of the transcendent totality matches an external reality. Now, but that it may not even have to, because this is something else I don't know. I mean, to what degree is sublime religious experience subjective? Let's say it's not a manifestation of, it's not something you experience in the objective world. It's something you experience in the subjective world. But then people experience it across the subjective world, because religious experience is a human universal, and it has patterns and structures that make it non-idiosyncratic. So it's transpersonal, but it's subjective. Well, we don't have a category in Western thought for transpersonal subjective, right? We think of transpersonal as objective, but there are experiences that are transpersonal and subjective. Well, what do we do with those? And are they real? Well, but then that also does depend on what do you mean by real? Because we ask these questions and we don't notice that the questions themselves, especially when they're deep questions, what is real? Well, when you're asked a question like that, you have to ask the question, well, exactly what role does the word what in that sentence play, and is and real? All of those are equally mysterious questions that are embedded within the question itself. And so those have to be taken apart. And that annoys people when I do that. But it doesn't matter, because when you ask about what's fundamental, you have to make sure that the tools that you're using to ask about what is fundamental are as fundamental as the question that you're trying to answer. And that's very, very difficult. I mean, because we are all split about what we mean by real too. Like, because we certainly all believe, at least to the degree that we are rational and scientific, which isn't that much, by the way. We certainly believe that, insofar as we're capable, that the objective and the scientific is real. But we act as if the subjective is real as well. So we certainly act as if other people are conscious, for example, and that matters and that they have free will, even though we can't make a completely coherent case for that. I mean, you can't make a coherent case for that can't be matched by an equally coherent case for the opposite, perhaps. At least it's debatable. But we certainly act as if other people are responsible for their actions, and so are we, and deserve to be rewarded when they're good and deserve to be punished when they're not good. And so we seem to accept those ethical propositions, and an ethical landscape is real. So suffice it to say that all these things are very complex. I mean, and in some sense, I feel when I'm asked that question is that I'm asked for a final answer. And I'd be pretty happy if I had a final answer, but I don't have a final answer.
I know, because you're looking for knowledge instead of faith. But
I'm just not bright enough. I just don't have it within. I have it in me.
Jordan,
the issue with Christianity. Sorry.
No.
Well, I see Christianity from the historical perspective as an extension of a discussion about the ideal that stretches back tens of thousands of years before the establishment of Christianity. There are precursors to what Christ represents in Mesopotamian thought and in Greek thought, and powerful, profound precursors. But the idea changed, right? It transformed, and I don't know why it transformed. I don't know what the meaning of that is. It's not nothing. I have no idea why Christianity sprang out of nowhere and dominated the world in the mere span of 2,000 years. It's a great mystery. Psychologically, I see it as part of the extended conversation about the nature of the ideal. Metaphysically, I'm at a loss. I don't know what to make of it. And so I keep trying to sort it out and to straighten it out in my own head. And I share that with people, but it's the best that I can do.
Well, it is very useful. Jordan, I wish I could continue this conversation with you for another hour and a half, but I'm out of time. It's great to see you, and you're looking great. And I hope you'll come back and continue talking about this.
Yeah, well, it would be nice to see you in LA if this bloody pandemic ever disappears.
Well, I've left LA. I moved out of LA, so I'm going east. So, but I will see you there.
All right. Well, it was very nice to see you, Andrew.
Great to see you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.